Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir. What do you do for
Good afternoon. I work for the Michigan State Police in the biology unit at the Metropolitan Detroit lab.
And what is your role within the lab?
I'm a forensic scientist.
And in terms of your role as a forensic scientist, do you have any particular area of focus to your work?
In the biology unit, we look for body fluid.
Okay. And what sort of education and training background do you have to do the work that you do for the Michigan State Police Lab?
I attended the University of Michigan. I received a Bachelor's of Science degree in biology. I came a little closer to home and I attended Wayne State University. I received a PhD in biochemistry. I did basic science research for about 9.5 years. Then I changed professions, started working for the Detroit Police Crime Lab. After about 4.5 years of that, I started working for MSP, and I've been there 15 years as of last month.
And during the 15 years you've been with the Michigan State Police Lab, have you been focused in the field of body fluid identification that entire time, or have you worked in other areas as well?
For the most part, it's been body fluid identification. I did work for many years. I started at the Northfield Lab. So at the Northfield Lab, I did a little body fluid identification, and then we moved to a sort of streamlined way of doing and analyzing evidence collection kits for CSCs, sexual assaults. And I did Y screening. That was a little body fluid identification, little DNA. I did that for about 8 or 9 years. And then I transferred to the Metro Lab in February of 21, and I've been exclusively doing body fluid identification.
And what is the field of body fluid identification?
Body fluid identification, we are interested in looking at the presence of blood, semen, and or saliva on evidence that we receive at the lab. If that doesn't pan out, then we also send evidence forward that we consider contact that has been handled in a way. And if that fails, so to speak, then we look at hairs as a last resort.
Okay. And do you have any sort of specialized training when it comes to the field of body fluid identification?
Back in 2009, roughly there were 10 of us that were hired, and so an outside company came in and trained us. The first 5 or 6 weeks was the serology, that was the name at the time, body fluid identification now. That consisted of lectures, reading, practice samples, a mock test, which then turned into a mock trial. After we passed that, then there was about 3 or 4 months of DNA training. More reading, more mock samples, going through the whole DNA process, lectures, 3 mock cases. One of those was picked for a mock trial. Once we passed that, then we were assigned to a seasoned forensic scientist at MSP, and basically we were observing how casework was done. After a few months, then we were allowed to do supervised casework, and then finally we were released to do independent casework on our own.
In terms of the methods you use in your casework, are those methods something that you just came up on your own, or are those methods more widely accepted in the law enforcement community and the scientific community as a whole?
They were accepted by law enforcement and the scientific community as a whole, yes.
And in terms of your work doing body fluid identification, have you ever testified as an expert in that field previously?
Yes, I have.
And has any court ever declined to qualify you as an expert in that field?
No, they have not.
Approximately how many times have you testified as an expert in body fluid identification?
44 times.
Your Honor, I'll pass for any board years to Dr. Hefner's expertise.
No questions.
Thank you, Your Honor. With that, I just move to qualify Dr. Hefner as an expert in the field of body fluid identification.
All right, based on his education, training, and experience, I'll qualify him as an expert pursuant to February 72.
Thank you, Your Honor. Did you have some role in doing some analysis when it came to the case of the disappearance of Zion Foster?
Yes, I did.
And would it be accurate to say that the work that you did in this case was done in 2 different phases?
Yes, it was.
And what was, just in general, what was the first phase of work that you did?
The first piece of evidence came to the lab in January of 22. I started working on the case in late February of 22. I finished in early March, and it consisted of trunk liners, a buccal swab from Mr. Brazier, is this correct? Brazier. Toothbrush from Ms. Foster. I'm going to have to look at my report.
And I guess we'll go through the report in a minute, but just what's the overall objective of that first phase of work that you did in this case?
To determine if there is blood, semen, or saliva present, collect potential hairs and or fibers for preservation for the future in case those first 3 things that we're looking for don't pan out.
Okay. And just so nobody's glued to the edge of their seat, in this first phase, was anything relevant found in terms of your overall analysis?
The tests for possible presence of blood were negative. I did send a couple of swabs from the trunk liners for contact, sent that forward for DNA. I also sent a cutting of the buccal swab from Mr. Brazier, and I did a swab of the toothbrush from Ms. Foster. I sent those 4 items forward for DNA testing.
Okay. And how about the second phase of the work that you did in this case? What was just the general focus of that second phase?
Well, in the first phase, I also did some collection of hairs, and I did tape lists of the trunk liners. Second phase was the hairs and the trunk liners coming back to the lab. That was June of 23, and I started working on that July of 23, and I finished near the end of August 2023.
Okay. And when you do analysis in a case like this one, do you document your analysis in the form of a laboratory report?
Yes, I do.
And I'm holding what's been marked as proposed exhibits 26 and 27. May I approach, Your Honor?
Sure.
Do these 2 proposed exhibits, are those 2 reports that you authored in connection with this case?
Yes, they are.
And is proposed exhibit 26 a report concerning the first phase of work that you did in this case?
Yes, it is.
And would proposed exhibit 27 be a report concerning the second phase of work that you did in this case?
Yes, it is.
And would you say that those 2 reports fairly and accurately depict the work that you did in connection with this particular case?
Yes, they do.
Your Honor, with that, I'd move to admit proposed exhibits 26 and 27.
No objection.
Okay, very good.
And may I publish, Your Honor?
Yes.
Sir, I just want to walk through these 2 reports just briefly. So in terms of Exhibit 26, do you see the section on page 1 that says evidence received?
Yes.
What information can we glean from this section of your report?
These are the items that I received related to this case that I eventually examined essentially in that order.
Okay, and so that would consist of items purportedly from the trunk, and then you have a buccal swab specific to Jaylin Brazier, and it says a Zion Foster electric toothbrush. What would be the purpose of having an item like that, like an electric toothbrush?
Well, that would be used for a reference sample. When it comes to the DNA testing phase, you need to have something to compare the DNA profile or profiles, if such is generated.
Okay, and as part of what you do when the evidence comes into the lab, you take it and you process it for potential future DNA analysis. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then you don't actually do the DNA analysis yourself. That's a different forensic scientist.
That's correct.
Okay. And if we go down to the section where it says interpretations, for the trunk liner, can you describe the work that you did with respect to the trunk liner?
Well, the trunk liner was a thick piece of rubber. I don't know if you have the pictures for them, but I do a visual check, look for potential reddish brown stain that's usually an indication of possible blood. Take pictures, make documentation, and then if there are areas of potential reddish brownish staining, I take damp Q-tip swabs up on the Q-tip, and then add some chemicals, and that is called the phenolphthalein test. And in this case, all those swabs were negative for phenolphthalein.
Okay, so that would mean you didn't find anything indicative of the presence of blood on the trunk liner. Is that
Possible
correct?
presence of blood, correct.
Okay. Moving along, when it comes to the Jaylin Brazier buccal swab, is it fair to say you're just processing that for potential future DNA analysis?
Yes, there's no testing done on reference samples. In this case, I just took a cutting, put it in the tube, and set it to the side for transfer to the Northfield lab, which is where the DNA testing is done.
Okay, and would that be the same for the toothbrush that was attributed to Zion Foster?
The toothbrush, I had to make a cotton tip swab damp, and I had to swab the toothbrush, let that dry, cut that, put it in the tube, and then send that forward for DNA testing.
Okay, and where it says Lacatan car seat covers, were those items analyzed?
No, they were not.
Okay, and was that, were you requested to analyze those items?
Originally, we thought that there was something else in that container. So
Okay.
essentially, the Lacatan car seat covers were sent to the lab in error.
Okay, and then if we go down to the passenger side trunk liner, can you describe the work that you did in this initial stage with respect to the passenger side trunk liner?
While making a visual examination, I saw potential hair/fibers, and so I collected those with clean set of tweezers and put them on your typical sticky notes. take the sticky note off and use the adhesive side, attach the hairs to that. I ended up with 3 of those. And then after that, I used the IR camera. IR stands for infrared, and essentially it grays out the surrounding. So it's a handheld device that you hook up to your computer, and I can watch my computer screen, and I can scan the object. Very good for clothing that's black because it grays out the environment, and blood will stain darker. And so when we see those, we can go back and we can circle, because you can't see that with the naked eye. I did that in this case, even though the liners are gray. I still went through that process, and I found 2 areas. I tested those for phenolphthalein, and they were also negative.
Okay. And how about the driver's side trunk liner? What type of work did you do with that?
I essentially did the same thing. There were more potential hair fibers on this one, because I ended up with a packet of hair that I made just by folding some paper a few times and making a little pouch. I put those in there with a clean set of tweezers, and then I also, again, used the IR camera again, found a couple areas, tested them for phenolphthalein. They were also negative. And I then also swabbed for potential contact. I did that for the passenger and the driver's side trunk liners.
Okay, and swabbing for potential contact, is that swabbing for potential future DNA analysis? Is that correct?
Yes.
And would that be contact DNA, like if I were to touch something, leave some cells behind?
Yes.
Okay. What would be the purpose of testing for the presence of saliva?
In case there was any saliva discharge, perhaps from the mouth. In order to do that, or see that, saliva is one of the things that fluoresces. So I got the alternate light source out, the ALS, and I scanned both trunk liners with that, and I found several places of fluorescence. I tested those by using a RSID card. It's almost like a home pregnancy test, but it's built and geared towards the detection of saliva. And in both cases, meaning for the passenger and driver side trunk liners, all those RSID tests were negative.
Okay. And in terms of the sort of disposition of evidence section of the report, what information does that tell us?
These are the samples that were sent forward for DNA testing.
Okay, and so that's just evidence that then gets held by the lab and goes to the DNA analyst for further review?
Yes, those samples are put into tubes, plastic tubes. Those tubes are then put in cryo boxes, and the cryo boxes are eventually transferred to the Northville lab and eventually assigned to a DNA analyst, and then the DNA process begins.
And can I ask, in terms of the trunk liners, were they in a condition in which you would have been able to use a microscope to analyze the liners?
No, they were way too large.
Okay. And in terms of the other methods that you used to analyze the trunk liners, if hypothetically there had been a microscopic portion of blood on one of those liners, would that have been detected by the methods that you used?
No.
Okay. And why is that?
It's just too small.
Okay. And I want to move to Exhibit 27 now. And again, this reflects the second phase of the work that you did in this case. Is that correct?
Yes.
And this phase of the work is focused on hair. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And if you can just kind of walk us through briefly the section entitled Evidence Received. What does this tell us about the work that you were able to do here?
Well, this tells us the hairs that I collected. It also mentions the tape lifts that I collected.
And what is a tape lift, if you can describe that for me?
That's when we take a piece of packing tape, essentially, and we sort of get it between our fingers here and actually tape lift an article of clothing. In this case, it would be the trunk liners, and so I went through the whole trunk liner doing this, and I used 4 pieces of tape, and then I put those pieces of tape face down on transparency paper.
Okay, and when you made these tape lifts, did the tape retrieve any fiber from the trunk liner?
It retrieved, yes.
And just visually looking at it, what did that fiber appear to be consistent with being?
Fibers and or potential strands of hair.
Okay. And in terms of these fibers that were retrieved using the tape lifts and any other fibers that you looked at, are we talking about long strands of hair, or are we talking about something short?
Short.
How short?
For the evidence taken from container 6, I think the longest strand of hair that I looked at was about 4.5 centimeters, and for container 7, it was 6.5 centimeters, which is roughly 2.5 inches.
Okay. And so in this sort of phase of your analysis, you're collecting potential hair fibers And then do you do some analysis to determine whether those are actual hair fibers or something else?
Yes, I do.
And would that analysis be contained in the interpretation section of your report, starting at the bottom of page 1?
Well, some of it is contained in the evidence received.
Okay.
Those would be listed, container 6 hair slides.
That'd be right here?
Yes.
Okay.
So I made some slides and also did some tape lifts as well.
Okay, and what is a hair slide as opposed to a tape lift?
Well, eventually the slides from the tape lifts are going to be on the hairs from the tape lifts are eventually going to be on slides, because that's how I can actually visualize a hair under the microscope.
Okay. And when you do analyze hair or potential hair to try to figure out whether it's human hair or something else, what is the general method that you use? Is it using a microscope?
Yes, it is.
And did you do that with these fibers described here in the evidence received section?
Yes, I did.
And if we go down to the interpretations, what's the first interpretation tell us?
Evaluation indicated the presence of non-hairs, so those are essentially fibers.
Okay, so that could be clothing, some kind of synthetic fiber of some form.
Fibers from the trunk liner itself.
Okay, and what about the evaluation below that, where it says presence of non-human hair?
Those would be essentially animal hair.
Okay, and how about the next set of interpretations from the passenger side trunk liner? Can you walk us through those?
Yes, we have the presence of non-hairs, so again, that would be fibers. The presence of non-human hairs, that would be animal hairs. We get to the third indication, that would be human hairs not suitable for nuclear DNA, however, may be suitable for mitochondrial DNA testing by a fee-for-service laboratory.
And what's the difference between nuclear DNA testing and mitochondrial DNA testing?
Nuclear DNA testing is going to be DNA found in the nucleus, present in our cells, and we can do that at MSP. Mitochondrial DNA is DNA from the mitochondria, with the organelles in our cells, and they are the powerhouse of the cell. So they make a component called ATP that powers basically all of our chemical reactions inside our cells. That is a different process.
And is that process of mitochondrial DNA testing something that the Michigan State Police Lab can do?
No.
Okay. And so it sounds like you found some possible human hair that was suitable for that type of analysis. That's not something that Michigan State Police can do. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. But you also found some that was suitable for DNA testing. Is that correct?
Yes, that is the last statement there, suitable for nuclear DNA testing, yes.
And then if we were to kind of scroll through the rest of this, is it essentially the case that the results were consistent with that for other items as well? You had some non-hair, some non-human hair, some hair that was potentially viable for mitochondrial DNA testing, and some hair that was viable for nuclear DNA testing.
That's correct.
So it's just kind of a mixed bag at this point.
That's correct.
Okay. And then in terms of the hair that is potentially viable for DNA testing, what do you do with that hair after you make that determination?
I take a cutting of that, put it in a tube, put those tubes in cryo boxes, and eventually they get sent over to the North Bay.
Okay. And that would be for the potential DNA analysis?
Yes, as would be described in disposition of evidence there.
Now, I want to show you what has been admitted as a portion of Exhibit 25. And specifically, I'm going to direct you to page 20 of Exhibit 25. Did you have an opportunity to see one or more pictures like this of the trunk of the vehicle in this case?
I saw one picture like this, but that's not it.
Not that, but did it appear to be similar to this configuration?
Yes.
And I guess based on what you observed to see in the trunk, are there any sort of limitations to the type of analysis that you are equipped to do when it comes to finding or identifying body fluids?
Yes, there is.
And what would the sort of limitations be?
The presence of items like you see in the trunk. The trunk liners are underneath that. So if I or another analyst would have had a chance of perhaps finding a body fluid, it probably would have been where Ms. Foster came into contact with things in the trunk. But it appears from that picture and the one that I saw that if she was on top of those items there, it would be somewhat difficult to find any body fluid past that on the trunk liners below.
Okay. Thank you. Nothing further.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Now, you indicated that some of the body fluids that you were trying to, I guess, locate as part of the body fluid identification is blood, semen, saliva, and contact DNA. Is that correct?
That's what we do, yes.
Okay. So it'll be fair that at some times saliva is preserved on certain materials in order for you to detect it and do an analysis on it, correct?
When you say preserved?
Or present?
Yes.
Okay. And just to be clear, in order for it to be present, it would have to be somewhat preserved on that particular material, correct? Is that your first statement?
Yes.
Now, when you receive evidence to analyze, you're not in the process of actually collecting this particular evidence, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, you just process what's given to you, correct?
That's correct.
Now, when you are shown pictures such as the one that the prosecutor just sent to you or showed you, are you able to suggest to say, hey, I see something in this picture that I'm not analyzing, I'm requesting that be sent to me so I can analyze it?
No.
Okay. Now, you indicated that when you use your infrared camera, you stated that it's hooked up to a computer monitor, correct?
It's hooked up to my laptop.
To your laptop, okay. And you're able to use the actual infrared camera to scan over a particular material while simultaneously looking at your monitor to see if there's a presence of blood, correct?
To see if there's some darker staining, because that's what usually happens. Blood stains darker, yes.
Okay. Now let me ask you, is there a comparative equipment such as a device that would magnify your view as you're going over a particular material while simultaneously looking at your laptop?
While using an infrared camera? No.
So you don't have like a electric magnifying glass or electric microscope that you would be able to scan over a particular area while looking at your computer screen to see a magnified image of whatever you're looking at?
Not something as large as Trunkliner? No.
Okay. It doesn't exist, or you just don't have that particular equipment?
We have a new stereoscope that you can hook up to a computer monitor, a computer laptop. That does have some magnification. I believe maybe 100x.
Okay.
We just got it, so no one in the lab has used it. That would be the only thing I can think of right now.
Okay.
Where you could scan something and magnify it.
Okay.
And look on a computer screen.
And was this particular equipment available to you when you did this particular analysis?
No, it was not.
Okay. Do you know if this particular equipment was in existence when you did your particular analysis?
I'm not sure, but we've had it for about a year, and I think they were probably working on it before that.
Okay. And you concluded your last analysis on August 25th of 2023?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have this particular equipment in your laboratory on that particular day?
Yes, we did.
Okay. Did it ever occur to you that you might want to use this particular equipment on the trunk liner to see if you can get a better magnification of it?
I could not, because it was not, I had not gone through validation. We hadn't had training on it, so it was here, but no one could use it.
Okay. Are you trained and certified on that particular equipment as of today?
I've gone through some training, but I would have to have a refresher because that was several months ago.
Okay. But when you received that particular training, at that particular time, were you certified or qualified to use that equipment?
I could have, yes.
Okay. If you remember, what date or approximately what date was it when you were certified to use that particular equipment?
Oh, I don't remember. Sometime last year, I don't remember.
Sometime last year?
No.
Okay. If you had to, I guess estimate, was it before the August 25th date, or was it of 2023 or after?
I think it would be after.
It would be after? Okay. And did you still have this particular trunk liner in your possession at the moment in time that you became certified on this equipment?
No, I did not.
You did not? Okay. Where did you send it to?
When we're finished with it, the agency, we send it back to the agency that sent it to us.
Okay. Can you request certain material to be resent back to you under the acknowledgement stating that, hey, I have received different equipment that could possibly help me further analyze this material?
I could talk to my supervisor. Then we would have a discussion perhaps. You might talk to the lab director. It may have to go up after that.
Okay. Was that done in this particular case?
No, it was not.
Okay. Now, you indicated that these car seat covers were sent in error?
Yes.
Okay. And did you make the determination that the car seats were sent in error?
No.
Okay. Is this something that was relayed to you?
There was a communication, some emails
Okay.
between my boss at the time, I believe Detective Chang, who was the submitting officer, that I believe they thought that there was a gray car seat in that container.
Okay.
And when it wasn't, obviously, I opened it up, it was black and tan. I mentioned that to my boss at the time. She contacted Detective Chang. I also have communication with Detective Chang, and that's when we determined that those car seats were the wrong piece of evidence.
Okay. Now, when you indicated that with the buccal swab and the toothbrush that belonged to Miss Foster, you stated that you did a cut for DNA, if I'm not misstating the terminology.
For the buccal swab, I made a cutting.
Okay. And could you just describe what do you mean by that when you say you did a cut for DNA?
Buccal swabs either come to the lab as a serrated tooth sort of swab, and I can just take a scalpel on a piece of clean paper toweling and cut off the first tooth, put that in the tube. It could also come as a cotton tip swab, something like you would put to do your ear or maybe take makeup off, whatever. In that case, I cut maybe about a half of that swab off and put it in the tube.
Okay. Now, so it'd be a fair statement that when you use or anybody uses the alternative light source, they would be able to detect whether or not there's a presence of saliva, correct?
We look for fluorescence.
Okay.
Saliva is not the only thing that fluoresces.
But it's one of the things that fluoresces, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and another item that would fluoresce would be blood?
No.
Blood would not? Okay. With semen?
Yes.
Okay. Now with blood, would you use a different type of procedure other than the infrared camera to detect the presence of blood?
The only other thing I could use would be luminol.
Luminol, okay, thank you. And did you use luminol in this particular situation?
No, I did not.
Okay. Is there a reason why you did not use luminol?
The one picture that I looked at, with all the items present there, it did not appear that luminol would be beneficial to use in that case.
Okay. But you didn't try anyway just to see whether or not it was present, correct?
No, I did not try.
Okay. Now you indicated that, first of all, do you know which portion of the vehicle the trunk liner came from, whether it was the top portion of the trunk or the bottom portion?
I believe it was the bottom.
You're not sure, or are you guessing, or?
I'm not sure, but if I had to say, I would say it was from the bottom.
Okay. And what would lead you to that assumption, or that it was the bottom?
By the shape, it looked like it was covering or going over part of the wheel well, and then it dipped down, which might be towards the end on both sides, so it had more of a shape that it was going to be on the bottom, fitting in, again, over the wheel wells, as opposed to something from the top hanging down.
Okay. And you analyzed multiple truck liners, correct?
No, I have some here and there.
Oh, no, in this particular case.
On this case, I had two.
Okay. You had a passenger side truck liner, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you had a driver side truck liner, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever inquire which part of the vehicle that this came from, so you wouldn't have to make a guess?
As far as, one was labeled passenger side, the other was trunk, and I went from there.
Okay, so you didn't inquire on whether or not this particular trunk liner on either side, passenger or driver, came from the top portion of the trunk or the bottom portion of the trunk, correct?
No, I did not.
Okay. And that information wasn't provided to you on exactly what portion of the trunk it came from, top or bottom?
No, it was not.
Now, you did not find any hairs that were, I guess, suitable for nuclear DNA testing. Would that be correct?
No, that's not true.
That's not true? Okay.
I sent some hairs forward from the passenger and the trunk and the driver's side.
Okay.
Disposition of my second.
For nuclear DNA testing?
Yes.
Okay. Just to be clear, which, I guess, numbering would there be that you found a potential human hair that was suitable for nuclear DNA testing?
When you say numbering,
As far as 6B, 7A, 7B, 6A,
I would have to look at my report.
if you could.
6B would be from the passenger side, and 7B would be from the driver's side.
Okay, thank you. And once this hair is gathered, do you analyze it or do you send it off?
I send it off.
Okay. And that's to another agency or another department?
There's another lab within the Michigan State Police.
Okay. Now, you also indicated that some other potential hair that could have been suitable for mitochondrial DNA testing, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you stated that this is or could be sent to a fee-for-service lab, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Does your lab work in conjunction with a fee-for-service lab?
We have the information that we could give to the agency and or the prosecutor if they requested that work to be done.
Okay. In this particular case, did you send that information to the prosecutor?
It was not requested, no.
Okay. But did you notify them that there was a potential hair sample that could be processed possibly for mitochondrial DNA, but it would have to be at a fee-for-service laboratory?
Not outside of what's stated in my report. No, I did not.
Okay. But your report did indicate that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then you did forward that report over to the prosecutor and or the officer in charge, correct?
It is sent out automatically, yes.
Okay. And you couldn't say whether or not they followed up with that information and went to a fee-for-service laboratory, correct?
If they would have followed up, there would have to be some contact with MSP, whether either my boss or the lab director, that we needed to get those samples sent to them. I would have to go back and then cut those samples, put them in a tube, and get them ready to be sent to the lab.
And as far as you remember, that process did not occur, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, are you shown a potential, are you shown houses, pictures of houses that search may have been done at a particular house?
As far as
where evidence is collected or where evidence is searched for?
sometimes there are pictures that are put into the OR, which is the repository for our cases. Sometimes there are pictures in there, many times they're not. Usually those will probably be tagged along with the crime scene reports, which I very rarely look at.
Now, if there were items of clothes or other items inside of this trunk, would you prefer to test these individual items with a fluorescent camera and or with an alternative light search?
Prefer, or as opposed to, I can only test what I get.
Absolutely. But if, in a perfect world, if it was your choice and your task is to find potential evidence of either blood, semen, or contact DNA, if you were searching the car and you saw pictures of clothes and other items, would you have liked those items to be then seized and then given to yourself in order to analyze these items for potential evidence?
Yes, I would have preferred evidence that was more in contact with Ms. Foster.
Okay. And that wasn't your decision on what you analyzed, correct?
That was not my decision, correct.
Just to be clear, the DNA that was gathered from, let me back up. The electric toothbrush that was provided to you for Zion Foster, you stated that was in order to get a particular sample for Miss Foster's DNA, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the reason you needed a sample of her DNA is in order to first get that sample and then compare it with potential evidence to see if there's a presence of that particular DNA in other places, correct?
It was used as a standard so that if there is a DNA profile generated from evidence, you can make, or comparison can be made. Yes.
Okay. Now, the question was asked of whether or not a microscopic, drop of blood can be identified. There's a possibility at times where blood that is not seen by the naked eye could be detected using either infrared camera, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And or luminol, correct?
Luminol would probably be better. Yes.
Okay. So there are ways of detecting microscopic pieces of blood through alternative methods. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the jury? See you, sir, you can step down.
Thank you, Honor.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Where do you currently work?
I currently work at the Grand Rapids Forensic Laboratory. I'm employed by the Michigan State Police.
And what is your position and title with the Michigan State Police?
I am a forensic scientist in the DNA unit in the Grand Rapids lab.
And how long have you been in that line of work with the Michigan State Police?
I have been a forensic scientist with the Michigan State Police for about 8 years. I've been in Grand Rapids for about 4 years. Prior to being in Grand Rapids, I was at one of the other state police laboratories, the Northville Laboratory.
And what sort of work does the DNA unit do at the Michigan State Police Lab?
So in the DNA unit, we will receive samples that are either evidence samples or reference samples, and then we can analyze those in the laboratory in hopes that we can obtain a DNA profile. And then once we obtain profiles, I can look at those profiles and also make comparisons of evidence profile of reference samples to those evidence profiles.
And could you describe for the jury, just in general, what is DNA?
So DNA, it stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. It's basically like a set of instructions in our body. It tells our body how to function. It also gives us some of our traits, like our hair color and our eye color. And we inherit half of our DNA from our mom and half of it from our father.
And is DNA unique to each person, or can two people have the same DNA?
So DNA is unique between each individual. Everyone will have a different DNA profile. The only exception to that would be identical twins. So identical twins will have the same DNA.
Okay. And what is when you say DNA profile, what does that mean? What is a DNA profile?
So when I talk about a DNA profile, it's basically a visual picture of what our DNA looks like. So when we do the processing in the laboratory, the very last step of the process, the sample goes onto an instrument that separates our DNA by size. So the picture that we're getting on this piece of paper, there's 24 different locations that I look at on our DNA. So on the piece of paper, there's 24 different locations, and at each location, there's what we call peaks on the paper, and those represent DNA types. So DNA types would be the different versions of our DNA that we could either get from our mom or we could get from our dad.
Okay, and if you have two separate DNA profiles from two separate sources, is there a way for you to compare those profiles to see if they are the same or different?
Yeah, so if I receive evidence samples into the laboratory, I can then take any known reference sample that I get. So say I get a buccal swab from somebody's mouth, I can take that sample and compare it to that evidence sample.
Okay, and in terms of your own background in doing this type of analysis and comparison, what's your educational background, if you can walk us through that?
So I have a Bachelor of Science in both forensic biology and in biotechnology. And then upon being hired into the Michigan State Police, I went through a training program before I could even work on cases within the agency. So that training, it consisted of looking at our procedure manuals, reading journal articles that were related to my field of work. I also observed trained analysts during my training and watched them do casework. And then once I did that, I was able to take basically practice samples that would mimic what we're actually doing in the laboratory. And I would do all of my laboratory work, the interpretations that goes with that. And then at the very end, I took a written test, an oral test, as well as a practical test in the laboratory.
And in terms of the methodology that you use for the type of DNA analysis that you do, is that methodology something that you just came up with, or is it something that's used more widely in the scientific community?
Yes, so it's something that's used widely throughout the scientific community.
And have you ever testified as an expert previously in the field of DNA analysis?
Yes, prior to today, I've testified 26 other times.
And has any court ever declined to qualify you as an expert in that field?
They never declined to qualify me. There were 2 times where they didn't even move to qualify me as an expert. They just let me testify.
Okay. Your Honor, with that, I'd pass for any voir dire as to the witness's expertise in the field of DNA analysis.
No questions.
Thank you. With that, I would move to have Ms. Sinclair qualified as an expert in the field of DNA analysis.
She qualifies as an expert in DNA analysis pursuant to Emily Restoration.
Thank you, Your Honor. And did you do some analysis in connection with the investigation into the disappearance of Zion Foster?
Yes, I did.
And would it be accurate to say that the analysis that you did in connection with this case was in sort of like 2 different phases?
Yes.
And just in basic terms, what was the focus of the first phase of analysis you did?
So in the first phase, that consisted of me getting reference samples as well as 2 evidence samples. So I received passenger side trunk liner swabs as well as driver side trunk liner swabs. And then the 2 reference samples that I received in that first part was a buccal swab from Jaylin Brazier as well as an electric toothbrush from Zion Foster, which was meant to be used as an alternate reference.
Okay, and so was the idea of this first phase of the analysis to determine whether a comparison could be made between those different items?
Yes.
And in terms of the second phase of your analysis, later on, what was the focus of that phase?
So with the second part, I did another report that was related to this case. I also received additional evidence samples for that report, and then I was able to determine whether or not I could make comparisons to reference samples with those evidence samples. So with those samples, I received 9 different hairs from the trunk liner.
And would the second report or the second phase of your work then be kind of limited to potential hair samples?
Yes.
And in terms of the analysis that you did in this case, did you document your conclusions for each phase in 2 different reports?
Yes, I did.
And I'm holding what's been marked as proposed exhibits 28 and 29. Can I approach them?
Sure.
Is proposed exhibit 28 a report concerning the first phase of the analysis that you did in this case?
Yes, it is.
And is proposed exhibit 29 a report concerning the second phase of the analysis that you did in this case?
Yes.
And would it be fair to say that those 2 reports fairly and accurately depict your sort of conclusions that you made with regard to your analysis in this case?
Yes, they do.
Thank you. I'd move to admit proposed exhibits 28 and 29.
No objection.
Thank you. May I publish, Your Honor?
Sure.
And again, I just to make sure nobody's glued to their edge of their seat here, did you find any DNA that could be used for comparison purposes, or were you able to make any sort of comparison here in this case?
So in this case, for both reports, I was unable to make any comparisons to the reference samples.
Okay. And if we look through the first report, Exhibit 28, in terms of the evidence section of the report, what does that tell us?
So the evidence section of the report, it tells us which items of evidence or reference samples that I received to analyze for this record.
Okay. And so what were these initial items then that you received?
So the first one, that's item 3DA, which was a buccal swab from Jaylin Brazier. The second one was item 5D, which was the alternate reference that I received for Zion Foster. It was an electric toothbrush swab. And then the 2 evidence items that I received were item 6D, which were passenger side trunk liner swabs, and then item 7D, which were driver side trunk liner swabs.
Okay. And when you are, have you worked in other cases where you've used a reference sample from a purportedly deceased individual?
Yes.
And what is the most common source of a reference sample for a deceased individual that the lab receives?
So we will get toothbrushes, like in this case. We expect to get items that the individual would have used often, that we would expect their DNA to be on. Sometimes we get hairbrushes, but toothbrushes are definitely one of the main ones that we get.
Okay. And the section of this report entitled Results of Examination, what does that tell us?
So it basically tells us what methods that were used in the laboratory, which chemistries we used in the laboratory, as well as possible computer programs that we could have used had I been able to make comparisons.
Okay. And how about the interpretation section? What's the first interpretation that's noted in your report?
So the first interpretation would be for item 3DA, so that buccal swab from Jaylin Brazier. I determined that that DNA profile was sufficient to make comparisons with.
Okay, so would that mean that hypothetically, if you had another DNA profile from another source, you could compare the 2? There would be enough DNA to work with there?
Yes.
Okay. And how about the second interpretation?
So the second one, that was in regards to the electric toothbrush swab, which was served as the alternate reference for Zion Foster. I also determined that that DNA profile was sufficient to make comparisons with as well.
Okay. And then how about the next interpretation at the top of page 2?
So with the passenger side trunk liner swab, I determined that that DNA profile was too complex to make any comparisons to. So basically that means that there were too many people contributing to that profile. In our procedures, I'm able to make comparisons to DNA profiles containing up to 4 individuals. So I determined that this profile had more than 4 individuals contributing their DNA.
Okay, and so if we could back up just a minute. So the type of swab that you're dealing with here from the passenger trunk liner, are you familiar with something called like contact DNA?
Yes.
And so what is contact DNA?
So contact DNA would be the type of DNA that we get from just touching an item. So if I were to say touch like this ledge, I could leave my DNA behind. It's usually lower quantities of DNA when it comes to contact DNA. We can also transfer our DNA. So if I were to touch an item and then someone else were to come up and touch that item, my DNA could potentially transfer to them.
Okay, and with the purpose of creating a swab for something like the trunk liner, would that be to identify potential contact DNA?
Yes.
And you said here that, so there is my understanding correct that there was DNA identified in that swab, is that correct?
Yes, there was.
It was just too complex to analyze for comparison purposes?
Yes.
Okay, and then how about the final conclusion for the interpretation section?
So with that other item, the driver's side trunk liner swabs, I also determined that that was too complex to make any comparisons to. So again, I just determined that there were more than 4 individuals contributing to that profile, so I was unable to make comparisons, but there was DNA present on that item.
And so you're not able to go in and figure out whose DNA that was, is that correct?
Correct.
And then for Exhibit 29, again, just kind of going to the top of the report in the evidence section, does that just list the sort of items that you receive for potential DNA analysis?
Yes, it does. It lists the 9 different hairs that I received for this analysis.
Okay, and similar to the items that you received for your first report, do these items before they come to you get handled by someone else at the Michigan State Police Lab?
Yes, they do.
And what would be the position or the role of whoever first handles these items?
So these items would have come from our body fluid identification unit. So they are looking for either fluids like blood, semen, saliva, or they could be just cutting swabs for contact DNA or looking at items like this that are hairs.
Okay. And are there any limitations with identifying DNA that's suitable for comparison purposes when it comes to human hair?
Yeah, so unfortunately with human hairs, we need root material. So right where the hair is attached to your head, we need the root material to be able to do DNA comparison, to do DNA work. And then sometimes, unfortunately, there's just not enough DNA in our hair. It depends on whether our hair was actively growing at the time or whether it wasn't, how much DNA could be present. So it's not surprising when we don't get DNA from hairs due to that low amount of DNA that we usually find.
Okay, and if we go to the interpretations section, is it fair to say that for the vast majority of the items that you looked at, you were not able to obtain a DNA profile? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and again, is that something that's surprising to you?
No, it's not surprising.
And there's one where you were able to obtain a profile?
So with this other one, item 6B2D, hair from passenger side trunk liner, that item I determined was insufficient. That profile was insufficient for comparisons. So that means that there wasn't enough DNA there for me to make comparisons to. So in this case, the DNA profile actually only contained 1 DNA type, and that's just not enough DNA for me to make any comparisons to.
Okay, and so I guess the bottom line is that based on the evidence you received, you were not able to make any comparisons. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Just to be clear, you stated that you did have a sufficient sample for Mr. Brazier and Ms. Foster to enable for you to compare their DNA with evidence, correct?
Had I had evidence that I was able to make comparisons to, I had a DNA profile that was usable from both of them.
Okay. And when you're checking for DNA, you're not just checking just for contact DNA. That'd be the first thing, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You're checking to see if their DNA could be present from blood, correct?
Yes, it could be.
Could be from saliva also?
Yes.
Okay, so you didn't just limit your analysis just for contact DNA, correct?
No, my analysis, it will capture all types of DNA.
Okay. And it is not your task to actually retrieve the, I guess, swab of DNA, say, from the trunk line, correct?
No.
Okay, that's presented to you, correct?
Yes.
And just give us an estimate. Is it a small sample? Just how does that sample look when it's being presented to you?
So the sample is fairly small. We either get very small cuttings of an item, or if we get swabs, it basically looks like the head of a Q-tip that gets used to swab the areas. And so we get that swab portion of that Q-tip, and that goes into a tiny little tube, and that tiny little tube with that sample is what gets brought into the laboratory for processing.
Okay. And in this particular analysis, you indicated that there were too many DNA profiles on the truck line in order for you to make a a comparative analysis?
So for both the passenger side and the driver's side trunk liners, those swabs, I did determine that there was too many people contributing to that profile. So there were more than 4 individuals.
Okay, and do you happen to know how many profiles or just more than 4?
Just more than 4.
Okay. And in incidences where that happened, are you able to then go back to, I guess, the body fluid identification task team and request a different sample from a different area of that material that may not have as many potential contributors?
Yeah, so it's always possible, given what results we might get with the DNA testing, that we could go back and look at other areas of evidence on the evidence or other items of evidence completely.
Okay. In this particular incident, did you request that the body fluid identification team retrieve a sample from a different area of this truck line?
So in this case, I did not request a different sample, no.
Okay. And would you be the only person to make that request?
No, the request can be made by the agency when they get the results from our reports. So it's not just me that can make that request.
Okay. And if you know, was such a request made by the agency who initially requested this evidence to be analyzed?
I do not.
You don't know, or it didn't happen?
I do not know.
Okay. Had it happened, would that have to go through you, or would you get knowledge of that particular request?
So if we were to get a request from the agency about additional processing, it would go through our laboratory directors as well as our supervisors to determine whether or not submitting more evidence on the case was was suitable to be made.
Okay. And if that process was, I guess, accepted, then ultimately that new evidence or new portion of evidence would then come to yourself to be analyzed?
Yes, it could come to me. It could also come to other analysts in the unit as well. But since I wrote this first report, generally, we keep evidence within reports between the same analyst.
Okay, it'd be fair that you did not do any subsequent analysis after this report was filed, correct?
Other than the hairs that I received, no.
Were you able to determine, in fact, that these were hairs?
No, that is not part of my analysis.
Okay, so you don't know whether or not this was hair or not, correct?
I only go off of the description. I do not make any determinations about whether they're hair or not.
Okay. And you indicated that item 6B2D, the hair that was recovered from the passenger or suspected hair that was recovered from the passenger side frontliner, it was insufficient for comparison purposes?
Yes.
And if I don't want to misstate your testimony, but did you indicate that there was only one DNA profile on that particular suspected hair?
So there was one DNA type. So as I stated before, I look at 24 locations in my DNA analysis. So each of those locations, so if we're thinking that the profile is from one individual, we could either see 1 or 2 DNA types at each location. So through this whole DNA profile, so all 24 locations of this profile, there was only one DNA type present.
Okay. And you were unable to compare that particular one profile with your 2 references?
Yes, I was unable to make a comparison between that one DNA type in that DNA profile to the reference samples.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir. What do you do for a living?
Detroit police officer,
And how long have you been a Detroit police officer?
30 years.
And what is your current role with the Detroit Police Department?
I work homicide,
And how long have you been working with homicide?
13 years.
And within homicide, you have a particular specialty.
Yes, I'm a certified video technician.
And what does that mean to be a certified video technician?
It means I'm certified through the Law Enforcement Emergency Services Video Association, LEVA, and I extract all videos from media devices, from DVRs, any hard drive, anything that contains video.
And how long have you been in that specific area of focus with video?
12 years.
And as part of your role with the homicide unit, did you have some involvement into the investigation of Zion Foster's disappearance in January 2022?
Yes.
I want to show you briefly something that's been admitted already as Exhibit 21. And I'm just going to publish a file on Exhibit 21 ending in 441. Are you familiar with this particular video?
Yes, this is the neighbor across the street from the suspect's house.
Okay, and is that on Greenfield Road in Detroit?
Yes.
And at some point during the course of the investigation, did you go to that neighbor's house in an attempt to extract video?
I did.
And were you successful at that time in actually obtaining video directly from that person's video system?
Her system was overwritten.
Okay. And do you recall approximately when you went to that location?
I believe it was right after Detroit received the case, so shortly after we got it.
Okay, so would it have been January 18th, 19th time frame?
Yeah.
Somewhere in there?
Yeah.
Okay, and so by that point the system is overwritten. But did you have contact with the neighbor who lived in this location?
Oh, yeah.
And did you sort of have an opportunity to view any videos that she had?
She saved screenshots of her video.
Okay, and so that's kind of what we're left with, are these screen grabs, essentially?
Yes.
And obviously it's kind of small on that screen. Is there a way to take a screenshot so that you can get like a larger image of just the video portion?
From your cell phone? Or?
From like your computer.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm holding what's been marked as proposed exhibits 92. May I approach, Your Honor?
Sure.
Is proposed exhibit 92 a series of screenshots taken from these videos?
Yes.
And would it be fair to say that those just represent sort of snapshots of specific moments in time, otherwise captured on the video that's been admitted as Exhibit 21?
Yes.
And would you say that the images contained in Exhibit 92 are fair and accurate depictions of the video itself?
Yes.
And is it fair to say also that there's some portions where there's something circled or highlighted?
Yes.
Okay. I move to admit proposed Exhibit 92, Your Honor.
Normally I wouldn't object, but is Sergeant testifying that he prepared these particular screenshots, or did he review this particular video and compare it with these screenshots to make sure that these screenshots were contained in this particular video? So I'm not sure if there's a...
You want to ask him?
Sure, can I?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, Sergeant.
Good afternoon.
Now, you had an opportunity. Did you have an opportunity to review all of this video footage contained in the exhibit that's presented on the screen?
These exhibits were when I was at the scene.
No. Did you have an opportunity to review the video footage for the footage from across the street that's being displayed on the screen behind you?
So if I'm understanding you correctly.
Okay, I'll ask another way. You indicated that you went over to this address and that there were screenshots of this particular video, correct?
Yes.
Had you had an opportunity to review all of that video?
Yes.
Okay. Had you had an opportunity to review these screenshots prior to today that you're holding?
Yes.
Okay. And you're able to testify that those screenshots accurately match the video that was extracted from the video camera from the house?
Yes.
Okay. No further questions. No objection.
All right. Good.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I publish?
Sure.
And just publishing Exhibit 92. Looking at page 1, what's the timestamp here?
January 4th, 22 at 11:14:38.
Okay. And at this point, is the driveway of the relevant house empty?
Yes.
And moving to page 2, what's the timestamp at this point?
January 4th, 22 at 11:15:05.
Okay. And at this point, is there there's a car in the
Yes.
driveway now? And there's a specific portion of the car that's highlighted in green there?
Yes.
And moving to number 3, is this at that same time, 11:15?
Yes.
Okay. And there's a portion highlighted at that point?
Yes.
And moving to number 4, we now at 1:41 a.m.?
Yes.
Okay. And moving to number 5, are we now at 1:48 a.m.?
Yes.
And number 6, are we now at 1:48 a.m. as well?
Yes.
And the difference between 6 and 7 would just be the lighting, is that correct?
Correct.
And then moving to the next one, are we now at 1:49 a.m.?
Yes.
And the next one, we're at 2:15 a.m.? And the next one, we're at 2:42 a.m.?
Yes.
And the final one, we're at 2:42 a.m., is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And the difference between these 2:42 a.m. would be the lighting, and does there appear to be something going on with the car at that point?
The trunk is open.
As part of your investigation, did you come into sort of possession about information of the potential location of Zion Foster's body being dumped?
Yes.
And did you search for video of the possible dumping of her body?
Yes.
And was there a particular location where you were able to find relevant video footage?
Yes.
And was that location an apartment building located at 13220 Woodward?
Yes. It's not an apartment building. It was a facility for not homeless, but like people in need.
Okay.
It was a facility.
But it was like a housing facility.
Correct.
Okay. And did you go to that location on January 20th of 2022 to extract video?
Yes.
And can you just kind of describe in general what type of camera system was at that location?
If I could refer to my report.
Sure. Do you have a copy of your
Yes.
report with you?
Yes.
And when you do video extractions, you generally document them in a report?
Correct.
And is that because you're kind of out on a daily basis extracting video, and it's
Yes.
important to document these things to keep everything straight?
Correct.
And if you looked at your report, would it refresh your recollections to the sort of basic type of video system at that location?
Correct.
Yeah, please take a look at your report and let me know when and if your recollection's been refreshed. And so what type of system was at that location?
It was an NVR DVR.
Okay, and were you able to download video from that system from relevant times?
Yes.
And when you downloaded that video footage, were you able to make any sort of determination of whether the video's system time was accurate compared with real time?
Yes.
And how is it that you, in general, go about making that determination of comparing the system time of the video system with real time?
So I calibrate the time using the actual DVR, the monitor. I go to the monitor and pretty much compare my phone with not my phone with had a brain freeze. So New York time compared to our time, which is basically made it an hour and 27 seconds fast.
Okay, and so you concluded that the system at this particular building, 13320 Woodward, it was an hour and 27 seconds fast compared to real time. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm holding what has been marked as People's Proposed Exhibit 46. Is it your understanding that some of the video that you extracted from the Woodward location is contained on this disc?
Yes.
And we've reviewed that together correctly before you testified?
Yes.
And would it be fair to say that that video that's on this disc is it's still in substantially the same condition it was in when you extracted it directly from the DVR system at that location?
Yes.
And that was back on January 20th of 2022?
Yes.
And viewable in this video, is there, I guess, is there something notable that's relevant to the investigation?
Something notable to the investigation?
Yeah.
As far as
What's in the view of the video footage that's on this disc?
the dumpsters behind the location.
Okay. With that, Your Honor, I move to admit Proposed Exhibit 46.
Okay.
And may I publish?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to start with a file on Exhibit 46 that ends in 4326 for the record. And I'm going to move ahead to a timestamp of 030327. And so, Sergeant Ford, so again, that time that's reflected on the video, how does that compare to real time?
It is 2:03.
So when it says 3:03 a.m. on January 5th, we're really looking at
3:03.
2:03, right?
2:03. Yes.
Okay, got it. And just to be clear, I want to go back to something that's been admitted as Exhibit 19. And in particular, page 12. So do you see the time reflected up here on page 12 of Exhibit 19?
Yes.
And that's 2 a.m. to 2:07 a.m.?
Yes.
And do you see the area depicted on this?
Yes.
And is this kind of right here where the yellow marker is that going to be viewable in our video?
Yes.
Okay. And so we're looking, when we're seeing 3:03 a.m., it's really 2:03 a.m., just like in this particular image on Exhibit 19?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm going to start at this 3:03 and 27 seconds. And just to be clear, as this is playing, in terms of the dumpster of relevance to the investigation, would that be in this area where my cursor is?
Yes.
And I'm going to stop at timestamp 3 a.m. 3:06 and 56 seconds. And so that would conclude the sort of relevant portion at that time?
Yes.
And is it fair to say that lines up with this slide we see for Exhibit 19, concluding with the 2:07 time frame?
Yes.
I'm now going to publish on Exhibit 46 another file ending in 0000. And I'm going to start at a timestamp of 8 a.m., 8 minutes and 45 seconds. So again, at this time, right now on the screen it says 0800 hours, 8 minutes and 47 seconds. Is that correct?
Correct.
But in real time, what time are we looking at?
7:08
And this is still on which date?
on the 5th.
5th of January 2022?
Yes.
Okay. And at this point, it's a little lighter out. Is that correct?
Correct.
And again, this area where the cursor is toward the top of the screen, that's kind of the dumpster of relevance.
Correct.
And this is just 5 hours after the last video clip that we watched.
Yes.
And at this point, where it says 8:11 a.m., is your understanding that dumpster is being lifted?
Yes.
I'm going to jump ahead to a couple of minutes. I presume playing at the timestamp of 8 a.m. and 16 minutes. And stopping at 8:17 a.m. is that sort of the last relevant portion of this part of the video.
Yes.
I'm now going to publish from Exhibit 46 a file ending 2000. And I'm going to start at the timestamp of 14:54 and 45 seconds. So looking at the timestamp on the video at this point, what day are we in now?
January 6th.
And what's the what would be the real time reflected at this point?
1:54:45.
54. Okay. And so if we go back to Exhibit 19, and specifically page 15, would this time frame of starting at basically 1:56 kind of correspond to this general time frame?
Yes.
Now I'm going to resume playing the final video on Exhibit 46 at 14:54 and 45 seconds. I'm going to stop the video at 14:57 and 29 seconds. Sergeant Ford, throughout your work on this investigation, did you become familiar with something called a transfer station?
Yes.
And what is a transfer station?
The transfer station is, so for instance, when the dump truck picks up the trash, it picks up the trash from here and transfers it to the garage down over here. And from there, they transfer it to the actual final place of storage.
Okay, and is that very location of the transfer station a place that you sort of physically acquainted yourself with, become familiar with?
Yes.
And I'm holding what's been marked as proposed exhibit 87. Is proposed exhibit 87 sort of a map overview of the transfer system,
Yes.
or transfer station, I'm sorry? And does that fairly and accurately depict the transfer station?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move to admit proposed exhibit 87.
No objection.
Submitted.
Thank you. May I publish?
Yes.
Okay, and looking at this exhibit, in terms of the area that's kind of blown up to the right, is that the transfer station?
Yes.
And can you explain, throughout your investigation, did you familiarize yourself with the process that happens when a garbage truck gets full? Where does it go once it's full?
It brings it to the transfer station.
Okay, and what happens at the transfer station based on your familiarity with the process?
The truck pulls into the bays.
And when you say the bays, can you sort of describe the bays that the garbage truck would pull into, and kind of point it out on the image
So
here?
up to the top. The top of the screen, the top portion of the building, there are bays, like a huge garage. The truck's back to the garage, get back in, and it actually dumps right on the floor.
Okay. And do you see the sort of what looks like almost like a chain of objects? What does that represent?
So those are the semis that actually pull into the chute. There's a chute to the side of the garage, and it actually goes kind of like underneath the side. And when they dump the garbage onto the floor, there's tractors that push the garbage back onto the semi.
And so are those semis just kind of lined up, waiting in line to take a load?
Take a load, yes.
Okay. And Your Honor, may I approach the screen just to point something out?
Sure.
Really quick. So, just so I understand it, would the garbage truck, the initial garbage truck, would it pull into this structure?
Yes.
And then these are the semi trucks up here.
Yes.
And would they pull into this
Yes.
structure from the side?
Yes.
And when they pull in, there's a bulldozer that's essentially
Like
pushing
pushing onto
trash into them.
Yes.
And once a semi truck gets loaded with trash, what happens to the trash from there, based on your understanding of the process?
The semi takes it to whatever yard is the final. So I think there's several actual dump yards, and I can't speak to where those yards are, but so whatever time of day, they all have specific times of which semi is going, say, north and which is going south.
And as part of your investigation, did you obtain some video from this transfer station that's depicted in Exhibit 87?
Yes.
And did you? What was the purpose of obtaining that video?
Attempting to identify the truck that made the Woodward location here at this location, so we can find out the timing to determine where they dump went.
Okay, so you want to find out when the garbage truck that dumps that empties out the dumpster, when it gets to this transfer station, right? And then do you also want to find the likely semi truck that then would have taken on that particular load?
Yes.
Okay. And then from there, you would want to try to identify the sort of final landing spot of that semi truck.
Objection. These are leading questions, right? You can ask him what his purpose was, but it's leading.
I'll try to rephrase.
All right, just a,
I guess, can you, well, I guess we'll get to the process in a minute, but at any rate, did you familiarize yourself with with whether there was a video system located at the transfer station?
Yes.
And were you able to obtain video from that system?
Yes.
And in terms of that video, did you collect some raw video?
Yes.
Did you also make some modifications to sort of like clip and trim that video for presentation?
Yes.
And in terms of both the raw video that you collected and the more presentable version of the video, is it your understanding that those files are on this disc that I'm holding that's been marked as proposed exhibit 47?
Yes.
And would it be fair to say that in terms of the raw footage reflected on this disc, that's in substantially the same condition it was when you collected it at the transfer station?
Yes.
Okay. And when you collected that video, were you able to make a determination as to the accuracy of the the system time compared to real time when it comes to transfer station video.
Yes.
And I'm assuming you didn't come with that memorized, is that correct?
Correct.
If you took a look at your report, would that refresh your recollection as to the accuracy between the transfer station's system time and actual time?
Yes.
Why don't you take a look at your report and let me know when your recollection is refreshed?
Yes.
And what was the difference, if any, between the transfer station video's system time and actual time?
It's 42 minutes and 32 seconds fast.
Okay, faster than actual time?
Yes.
Okay. With that, Your Honor, I move to admit proposed exhibit 47.
Okay.
Okay, so did,
Thank you. May I publish?
yes.
Okay, I'm going to play a file starting labeled clip 1. And Sergeant Ford, what area of the transfer station is depicted in this first clip?
This is actually the weigh station.
Okay, and where is that relative to the transfer station?
It's right at the beginning.
Okay. So,
So you will come off ferry right into the weigh station.
okay. And I'm going to move to 3 minutes and 20 seconds into the video. Okay, and this particular image, stopping at 3 minutes and 35 seconds into the video, is there any significance to this?
I can't see it, but I think this is the going off of the truck number on what we're compared to this truck number is the same truck.
Okay.
Is he saying it is, or is he speculating? I'm not sure. I'm sorry.
It,
It's hard to see on this. Well, I guess we'll get to that in the slides later. But at any rate, you see a truck coming into the weigh station.
Yes.
Is that correct?
yes.
And I'm going to move to a different file on Exhibit 47, and it is a file. It starts with the letters XVR CH1 main 2, and it ends in the number 100,000. And just looking at this image right at the start of the video, this area toward the top of the screen, where is that? What are we
So
looking
that's
at right
the
here?
bays where they dump the garbage.
Okay. And if I just pull up for reference really quick, going back to Exhibit 87, would that be this area on Exhibit 87?
Yes, the top shaded area.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Could you go back to that? 'Cause I was not confused. Did he indicate the top shaded area?
Yes.
On.
You see the shade at the top of the building?
Is it where my cursor is right
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
now? And so is the camera kind of somewhere over here,
Yes.
facing this area?
Yes.
And I'm going to skip ahead to the timestamp of 9:50 and 5 seconds. And in terms of relevance to the investigation, is there any relevance that you found to this portion of the video that we're watching right now?
Just the purpose of the timing of the dump compared to the timing of the truck that goes into the chute.
Okay. to stop at 9:53 and 15 seconds. I'm now going to publish a portion of Exhibit 47 that's titled Event. Sorry, open it in a different player. One second. And Sergeant, what's the I guess the purpose of this part of the video?
Attempting to show the trucks cleaning the area in the back.
Okay. Alright, with the conclusion of that video, I am holding what's been marked as proposed exhibit 88. Can I approach around?
Yes.
And Sergeant Ford, what is contained in proposed exhibit 88?
This is the Woodward location facing the dumpsters when the garbage trucks pulls in, trying to identify the numbers on the trucks.
Okay, and is there more than one picture in exhibit 88?
Yes. And this is the truck from Woodward going to the weigh station.
And so would these images in 88 be still images from some of the videos that we just went over?
Yes.
And do those still images contain sort of like converted times based on the time conversions that you discussed earlier?
Yes.
And are these still images from sort of like pertinent parts of the video that assisted you in identifying specific vehicles
Yes.
in this investigation?
Yes.
And are these specific times and vehicles that were identified, were they sort of relevant to the ultimate landfill investigation done in this case?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move to admit proposed to the 88.
Okay.
Wait a minute.
Thank you. May I publish?
Yes.
Okay, and just starting on the first slide of exhibit 88, where are we looking at this point?
The green circle up to the left, next to the timestamp.
Where is this location, though?
Oh, behind Woodward, the
Okay.
facility on Woodward.
And what's the sort of, what would be the actual time at this point in time based on the time conversions?
708.
Okay. And so the 7-11 there is not accurate? Maybe a mistake?
For the time up here in conversion will be 708.
Okay, got it. And were you able to identify a specific number to the garbage truck depicted in this video?
Yes.
Okay. And is it your understanding that garbage trucks can have the same number, or are those like unique identifiers?
This identified.
Okay. And then if we go to the next slide, 2, are we at the weigh station now?
Yes.
And I know that the numbers aren't necessarily viewable in the still images, but based on your review, is this the sort of time that you were able to find the matching truck number
Yes.
under the weigh station?
Yes.
Okay. And then moving to slide 3, what's the significance of what's circled in this slide?
So the semi up to the right inside the circle. If you see the red truck, you see a white semi right in front of it, and that's the truck that was in the bay when our dump truck went in.
Okay. And if we go to the next slide, what's the significance of what's circled here?
That's our dump truck pulling into the bay.
Okay. And then the next slide, again, what would be the significance here?
Just showing it dump in the bay.
Okay. And is the idea that could there be more than one semi-truck in the bay at this time, or just one?
It's 2, but it's only one loading.
Okay.
The other one is ready to.
It's like waiting in line?
Yes.
Okay. And then moving to the next slide, what's the significance of what's circled here?
It's our truck leaving.
Okay. And then the 7th slide, what's the significance of this slide?
Our truck exiting the yard.
So this is just following further down the line?
Yes.
And in terms of the next slide, the final slide, what's the significance of this slide?
Identifying the semi that picked up the load.
And what would be, how were you able to identify the semi truck here?
Truthfully, watching several hours to determine which one was which, but in the timing. But this was the semi that identified going into the yard and leaving the yard after the death.
Okay. And so, what I guess based on your early investigation, did you reach any conclusions with regard to the potential relevance of this semi truck?
Yes, from the number from this semi truck, we were able to talk to waste management and find out where this truck went, where he took his load.
And that would be to a landfill?
Yes.
Okay. And you use the sort of unique identifier on that truck that is sort of visible in this picture, but not entirely visible?
Yes.
Sergeant Ford, are you familiar with a place called the Detroit Detention Center?
Yes.
And what is the Detroit Detention Center?
So all the precincts closed several years ago. Now we take all our prisoners to the detention center over on Mound, which is the old NBOC jail. But now it houses just our prisoners.
And so if somebody is held in custody before charges are filed, where might they be held?
At the detention center.
Okay. And at the Detroit Detention Center, do you have familiarity with whether individuals housed there have the ability to make phone calls to the outside?
They do, yes.
And do you have familiarity with whether those phone calls are recorded or not?
They are.
And is there a particular system that is used at the Detroit Detention Center to store recordings of inmate calls?
Just GTO.
And as part of your role in the homicide unit, do you have access to that system?
I do.
And are you able to go into that system and pull call recordings?
Yes.
And were you asked to pull some recordings when Jaylin Brazier was housed at the Detroit Detention Center?
Yes.
And when you go into the system to look for recordings, can you go in and find recordings for a specific inmate, or is there some other way that you search the system?
So we have two systems. We have one system that tells us when the suspect was arrested, and then we have the GTO system that just lists all the calls. So you basically find out what time the suspect made the location, and you just start listening from the time he entered to the time he exits.
Okay. And did you find some potentially relevant calls from Mr. Brazier's time in custody at the Detroit Detention Center?
I did.
And did you extract those calls, those recordings of those calls from the GTL system?
Yes.
And I am holding what's been marked as proposed Exhibit 48. Is it your understanding that one of those calls, a recording of the calls, is contained on this particular exhibit?
Yes.
And does this exhibit also contain a data sheet that indicates the date and time of the call and the number called?
Yes.
And is that information that you can also pull from the system?
Yes.
If you were to go back into the system today and pull this same call, would it be in substantially the same condition it's in now on this particular disk?
No.
Explain that.
We have 1 year.
1 year, okay.
Okay.
But let me rephrase that. If, to your knowledge, the recording that's on this disk, is this in substantially the same condition it was when you initially extracted it from the system?
Yes.
And when you extract it from the system, part of that is to preserve potential evidence, is that correct?
Correct.
So, because the recording system has a retention period?
Yes.
Okay. With that, I move to admit proposed Exhibit 48, Your Honor.
Your Honor, I object. Back at the board here. Sure. Sorry, Ford. Thank you. Good afternoon again, Mr. Sergeant Ford. I'm sorry.
Good afternoon.
Now, you stated that these particular calls are managed by GTL?
Yes.
Okay. Would that be the same company as Tailmate?
I don't think so. I'm not sure. I know our company is GTO.
Okay. So this is a third-party organization who maintains these phone calls, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And these particular calls, they're not stored on site at the Detroit Detention Center, correct?
No.
Okay. And you don't know exactly where these particular phone calls are stored, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You don't know how these particular phone calls are indexed by GTL, correct?
They're
You don't know how these particular phone calls are indexed when they're stored by GTL, correct?
Oh, you're losing me here.
Okay. You don't know how these particular phone calls are labeled at GTL facilities, correct?
So you're talking if I pull the calls, how they're labeled, or before I pull the calls?
Before the calls, they're stored on some type of mainframe, correct?
Correct.
Okay. That mainframe is not at the Detroit Detention Center, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Judge, I'm going to object to this. It's not time for cross-examination yet. The foundation has been laid for the admissibility of this call. There's another witness who's familiar with the defense voice, who identified the defense voice on this disc. That's frankly all that's needed. If he wants to cross-examine on this, he can cross-examine on it later, but I don't think this goes to the admissibility of the evidence.
I believe so. Pursuant to MRE 8036, I'm assuming that the prosecutor is indicating that this is the custodial of records of this particular phone calls, and I would suspect, based upon the testimony that's been elicited so far, that in fact that Sergeant Ford, in fact, is not the custodian of records of this particular cause. So he's not in a position to testify to the authenticity of the cause in this particular situation.
First of all, it's coming in as a party admission under the exception to hearsay. When we look at Rule 901, which is the rule for authenticating or identifying evidence, under 901B5 indicates opinion about a voice, an opinion identifying a person's voice whether heard firsthand or through mechanical or electronic transmission or recording, based on hearing the voice at any time under circumstances that connect it with the alleged speaker. It indicates that that is a way of satisfying the requirement for authenticity. And so here, I asked Sergeant Jones when she was testifying very specifically about 4 specific discs and whether she reviewed recordings on those discs and whether she was familiar with a voice on those discs. And she indicated that for each disc she was familiar with the defendant's voice on those discs based on her prior interrogation of him. What's more, he fully authenticated that there is what's essentially a database that he can go into to extract recordings, and that's what he did. So I don't think, if he wants to argue this goes to weight, and there's another inmate talking about this case who's not Jaylin Brazier, he's free to do so, but this doesn't go to admissibility.
I would say that, if this is obviously attempting to be entered under the hearsay exception of the records of regularly conducted activity, which states a memorandum, report, record, or data compilation in any form of acts, transactions, occurrences, events, conditions, opinions, or diagnoses made at or near the time by or from information transmitted by a person with knowledge if kept in the course of a regularly conducted business activity, and if it was a regular practice of that business activity to make the memorandum, report, record, or data compilation, all as shown by the testimony of the custodian or other qualified witness, or by certification that compiles with a rule promulgated by the Supreme Court or statute permitting certification. And Your Honor, I don't believe that we have this in this particular case. Sergeant Ford is in the position that he's being attempted to verify these records under the hearsay exception as being a custodian of these particular.
I don't think it's hearsay.
Yeah,
It's a party admission.
Yeah, we're not in hearsay exception territory under 803 because it's a party admission. Even if we were under 803.6, it's not limited to custodians of record in the plain language of the rule. It's custodians of record or other qualified witnesses. So even if we were there, we're still, we got belts and suspenders here for the admissibility of this. And, Your Honor, may I publish it?
This is exhibit number
48, Your Honor. Okay, and Sergeant Ford, you see this file on Exhibit 48 that's ending in 441. You see that?
Yes.
Okay, and if we go into the call list, is this call list contain data from the files that you were able to pull from GTL?
Yes.
And so for this file ending 441, what would be the date of that particular file?
January 20th, 22 at 10:21.
Okay, so the 22:21, that'd be military time for 10:21 p.m.?
Yes.
Okay.
One, by assignment, please enter the area code and phone number you are calling now. Please state your name at the beep. Please hold. Please wait while your call is being connected. Please hold. Hello, this is a prepaid call from a detainee at the Detroit, Michigan Detention Center. To accept this call, press 0. Your current balance is $22.18. This call is from a correction facility and is subject to monitoring and recording. Thank you for using GTL. Hello?
Hey, baby.
What's going on?
I nothing. I just wanted to call today.
Are you okay?
Yeah, you there?
Yeah. Well, Gary was telling Sierra family about the case.
Really? And that's why this shit going on?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Where you hear that from?
From people, a lot of people knowing too much about the case, and the shit not true, and they say he's spreading stuff.
Right.
Oh, also, your only one to ask you, did they make you start eating paper?
Oh, they had maybe do a statement that Gary had put together and everything, and that's only advice.
But you should be honest and tell them. Gary promised you if you tell them what he wanted you to say, then you guarantee to be home to your family.
Mm-hmm.
Just tell them what I'm telling you, and then you will make it home. So you gotta tell them that he's made promises to you, and sitting out, everything is in the fan, and you ain't do shit.
Okay.
And then he's trying to spread rumors talking about they got cameras and stuff on the back of your house or somebody else's house showing that you were bringing something.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what he's spreading people too, talking about they got video footage. Today the police went and found the video from the house behind your.
That's the argument on the record.
Yes, I would say that this particular statement that's being introduced contains a lot of impermissible hearsay from other individuals. I know the prosecution may try to argue that, in fact, my client adopted these particular statements, but for one, I think it prejudices the jury to hear what somebody else is more or less attempting to force feed my client, that he's just sitting there agreeing, like, okay, whatever, yeah. I don't necessarily would indicate that that's an adoption that would rise to the level that the jury would hear this impermissible hearsay.
And Your Honor, if I can continue publishing the call, I think it'll speak for itself.
Okay, go ahead.
They saw you bring something out the house. So that's the rumor spreading around, not from Gary.
If we could possibly listen to this in camera, because I'm not sure if the jury could hear this. I know in other cases, I'm able to hear the conversation from the jury room, and this is pretty loud. And
I'll turn it down.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, got so many people that know of him, and he's just running his mouth and stuff that's not true.
Okay. You can get in contact with my mom there enough that he also said you were down here.
Yeah,
So they can't bring me to him at any point tomorrow or anything.
No, you don't have to have shit to say him. Tell them that when they bring him to you in front of this, tell him he is fired and you don't no longer need his service, and tell them that you will request. You need to request for an attorney, and you don't got to say shit to nobody else. Because he's still made all these promises to you. So that kid's not going to even stand no more because he's going to make promises that if you just say what I'm telling you to say, he's going to make it home.
That's basically what he said to me and my mom. So okay, when you say basically what I said and everything, that it would go.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can enforce that at all. This, I mean, he's clearly adopting what this person is saying, which is Mr. Smith.
this particular voice is not Ms. Smith. It's an unknown person to me, but I'm not sure that the identity of that person is actually relevant. What's relevant is that he said what he said.
If I'm not mistaken, I think he's talking about his past attorney.
He's talking about Mr. Jones.
Mr. Jones, yeah, Gary Jones.
Right, he's admitting that he's admitting the nature of the conversation that she, this sort of unknown female party is suggesting.
But there's other hearsay in there as far as about being cameras or anything. All that was just admitted by my client was, yes, Mr. Jones told me to go in to the police and tell them what I told him. That's not an adopting of every other statement that was made by this other particular witness or individual on the phone call. All he said was Mr. Jones told me to go in and basically tell him what I told him. And I don't believe that's the adoption of all the other hearsay that this particular individual was eliciting.
And to be clear, none of this other content, it's not like I'm going to be standing up and closing arguments saying you should listen to this person on the phone. I mean, it's not, I think it's almost, I just don't think that we can play the portion of the call where the defendant is saying what he says without this other portion, because I just don't think it's going to make any sense in context.
And I would say it's irrelevant whether or not the prosecutor intends to use that in his closing. Obviously, he's using it for a purpose for the jury to hear this whole conversation, to put into their mind, and it's impermissible hearsay there. When this individual is indicating that Mr. Jones allegedly saying that there was a camera here, a camera here.
But that's the hearsay came up with the truth of the matter, was per se.
No, but I guess if the court perhaps could give a limiting instruction and say only, you should not consider the comments made of another party on the call or something, something to that effect.
That's fine. Okay.
One, para español.
You can see it. All the witnesses are present.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to start publishing Exhibit 48 again around the next 50 seconds into the call.
They had maybe do a statement that Gary had together and everything, and that's only aside.
But you just be honest and tell them. Gary promised you if you tell them what he wanted you to say, then you guarantee to be home to your family. Just tell them what I'm telling you, and then you will make it home. So you gotta tell them that he made promises to you and sitting out everything you're putting in the fan, and you didn't do it.
Okay.
And then he's trying to spread rumors talking about they got cameras and stuff on the back of your house or somebody else's house showing that you was bringing something. So that's what he's spreading people too, talking about they got video footage. Today the police went and found a video from the house behind your house saying they started to bring something out the house. And so that's the rumor spreading around.
And Sergeant Ford, just to be clear, that issue you heard about the video, do you understand that to be not true?
Yes.
He's running around telling me, like, I got so many people that know of him, and he's just running his mouth about stuff that's not true.
Okay. You can get in contact with my mom, let her know that we all said we were down here.
Yeah,
They can't bring me to him at any point tomorrow or anything.
No, you don't have to have shit to say to him. Tell them that when they bring him to you in front of this, tell him he is fired and you don't no longer need his service, and tell them that you need to request for an attorney, and you don't have to say shit to nobody else. Because he shouldn't have made all these promises to you. So that kid's not going to even stand no more because he shouldn't have made promises that if you just say what I'm telling you to say, he's going to make it home.
That's basically what he said to me and my mom. So if you say basically what I said and everything, that it would go third place.
Exactly. So you need to let that be known, and so that they can appoint you a new lawyer, and whatever the person said and fine is going to be dismissible because he shouldn't have made promises to you. And he's going to tell me today on the phone, like, do you know this is going to be the biggest profile case that I've had?
So he's trying to milk you basically.
Yeah. He's trying to get a name for himself. He never trusted him, and then he told you, you do this and you do that, I guarantee I got you, you will get home. You're not going to be there. He's lying. Trying to get you in trouble. I wouldn't say shit else to them. Nothing. When they
What else
come
have they been circulating that y'all hear about?
time,
I said, what else been circulating that y'all hear about?
just pretty much that they supposed to find the video from the house behind your house showing you coming out the back of the house.
And then they show, your auntie said that it was a video on the news saying that they saw us go into Waterford. Well, it was the Davis house.
So I guess they took a video from the streets and stuff, anywhere that they assume y'all went, and they following each camera to see what directions y'all went.
So they're trying to keep you off the body.
So they said, yeah, right. They said they got y'all in Waterford and Highland, what they say, Highland Park? Hazel Park. Hazel Park.
Yeah, that was shit on herself.
Yeah, so they supposed to have some private detectives on the case looking into all the videos that goes alongside whatever street that they see that y'all trying to pull in the camera they can possibly pull. And it's just all come from Gary lying, making promises, and it's just all the whole time he's trying to set you up.
Yeah, I want you here to say this fucking railroad. Look at these women. I went to go talk to the detectives. He on the phone and I'll be on with him. He's saying to say, basically what he said, and just stick with that and I'll be a maker.
I'll stop the call at 6 minutes and 11 seconds, and I don't have any further questions.
All right, and just remember the jury to disregard the comments made by the female individual on the call with regard to rumors, right, as started reporting indicated those are unsubstantiated and obviously it hasn't been admitted into evidence that you can't consider it reaching a verdict. All right? Right, Mr.
Good afternoon, Sergeant.
Good afternoon.
Now, this video on Greenfield, this camera footage, that was sent to you?
No.
You went over there and downloaded it?
No.
Okay. How did you ever become in receipt of it?
I just viewed it when I made the location.
You just viewed it on the homeowner's system?
On her phone.
On her phone? Okay. And you stated that on the actual system, the video was overwritten?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what the retention time is for that particular system for videos?
When I went to that location, it had already been overwritten, so
Okay.
I can't tell you how long.
Did you ever try to ascertain how long this particular system maintained videos?
No, I did not.
Is there a reason why you didn't try to ascertain how long?
It was already overwritten. There was no need.
There was no need? Okay. And you didn't do any type of, I guess, comparison between this particular video to see if there was an offset at the time, correct?
I did.
Okay.
I looked at her cameras, and I saw her cameras were on time.
They were on time?
Yes.
Okay. You didn't document that in your report, did you?
No.
Okay. So they were on time to the very second?
Yes.
Okay. And normally would you indicate that particular step?
If I extract the video, yes.
Okay. Even if you compare the video, do you normally reduce that to writing as to that the fact that you actually compared the times and they were on time or similar?
When I was at that location, I was not comparing. I was just doing what she had on her phone.
So okay. So how would you determine whether or not this particular video on the phone is from the correct date and or time?
So the video on her time was time-stamped, and they had the correct date and time.
Okay. But you said you didn't do. Did you or did you do? I'm confused. Did you or did you do? Did you not do any comparison between her system time and the actual time that it was?
So when I went to extract the video was overwritten. But of course, when I go to extract the video, I calibrate the time. And when I calibrate the time, the system was on time.
Okay. And do you normally reduce that to writing, the fact that you did that particular step?
No.
Okay.
Unless I actually extract the video.
Okay. And as far as the transfer station, you indicated that you don't know where the trucks go after they leave the transfer station?
No, I don't.
Okay. This particular semi-truck that you suspected carried the particular load that was dumped by this garbage truck, do you know where that truck went?
I do not, no.
Okay. In your notes, is there a particular semi-truck identification number that you have that you know that was the correct truck?
No, I do not.
So how do you know you were looking at the right truck?
I provided the information that I gathered from the weigh station and from the Ferry, and that information was turned over to Sergeant Jones. Sergeant Jones was able to take the numbers from those trucks to determine where those trucks went.
Okay. And were you with Sergeant Jones when that determination was made?
No.
Now, you looked at a video, I believe it was Exhibit 47, where it showed a garbage truck that was entering the transfer station. Remember that?
Yes.
Okay. And it had a time up there, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And after watching Exhibit 47, you were unable to determine whether or not this was a particular truck that picked up the dumpster off the road, correct?
One more time.
When you during direct examination, the prosecutor showed you Exhibit 47. Exhibit 47 was a video footage of a particular truck entering the transfer station, correct?
Correct.
And during that questioning, you were unable to verify whether or not this particular truck was in fact this truck that picked up the dumpster that was located off of Woodward in Highland Park, correct?
From this video?
Yes, yes.
Yes, I couldn't see.
Okay. And you extracted this particular video, correct?
Yes.
And you indicated that you watched hours and hours of video, correct?
Correct.
And you were looking at the times of the video. You were looking at the times of the video, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you indicated that you calibrated, or I guess made a comparison of the actual time and then the time of the particular camera, correct?
Correct.
And you said you determined it was approximately 42-minute difference, correct?
Correct.
In order to make that determination, you had to watch the video, correct?
Correct.
So why is it that when you saw this particular Exhibit 47, you were unable to identify this particular truck from a video you extracted?
Because I've done it in my office where I can slow it down, zoom in, and I can see the truck number.
Okay.
I can't see the truck number from here.
Okay, but you were able to see the time stamp on the video, correct?
I'm not going to sit here and say that's the truck when I can't see it. So
You were able to see the time of the video, correct?
Correct.
And did you write any notes down of when this suspected truck that picked the dumpster up from Highland Park actually entered the transfer system?
yes.
Okay. So based upon your notes and your knowledge of the video, you were still unable to watch this particular video, which had a time that was indicated, in being able to verify that this was the right truck, correct?
Correct.
And you were also unable to tell from the still photo that if this was the particular truck that entered the transfer station, which dumped the garbage can from Highland Park, correct?
One more time.
You were unable to view the still photo that the prosecutor showed you and verify that this particular truck on the still photo was in fact the truck that dumped the dumpster in Highland Park. Is that correct?
Correct.
Did you reduce in writing or your notes the actual truck number that you believe to have picked up the dumpster from Highland Park?
Yes.
Okay. And were you able to match that with the truck or a truck that entered the transfer system?
Yes.
Okay. Now, as far as these phone calls from the Detroit Detention Center, do you after you're requested to extract these phone calls, do you listen to the phone calls or do you just extract them?
I listen.
You listen to them?
Yes. What? Yes.
In this particular situation, do you listen to them?
You have to.
Or do you provide or do you generate the list of calls, the call list that was shown to you? Do you generate that?
Yes.
Okay, so do you actually type it?
No.
Okay, how is that particular list generated?
It comes with the cost.
From GTL?
Yes.
Is there any way that you independently verify whether or not the call that GTL sends you is in fact the call that you requested?
So I go in. So say if the person gets locked up at 1 o'clock, I start listening at 1 o'clock, and I'll listen until I find the person. If he ever makes a call, I attempt to locate that person. Once I locate that person, then I can listen to the calls to discover all the phone numbers that they make. And then I run those phone numbers in the system to see, to get all the calls they make.
Okay, I understand that. My question is, do you do any verification to verify whether or not the call that you receive from GTL is actually the call that you requested from GTL?
So the call I listen to is the call I request. So I'm not really understanding your question.
Whether or not you independently verify as far as timing, the date, the actual individual?
So when you heard the call, it tells you the time. That sheet tells you the time, the day, tells you what cell he's in. Only thing it does not tell you is the defendant or the caller's name.
Okay. And do you use any type of like voice recognition to determine whether or not this, whoever it is on the phone, is actually the person that you suspect it would be?
Normally they'll somehow identify themselves or talk about a case where I can put it together to figure out who the person is.
So, as far as my question, my question was, do you use like any type of voice recognition?
No.
Now, as far as Exhibit Exhibit 88, Slide 1. Now, Sergeant, did you prepare these Exhibit 88 as far as these still photos?
No.
Okay. And you indicated earlier that from your comparison, there was an hour difference from this particular camera footage to actual time, correct?
Correct.
And it indicates in the right side of the particular slide, 7:11, correct?
Correct.
And you indicated that that was an incorrect time?
Correct.
Do you know who inputted this time?
No.
Okay. But that would be an incorrect time, correct?
Correct.
Did you have an opportunity to review Exhibit 88 prior to testifying to that?
Yes.
And did you make it known that this particular time on this slide was inaccurate?
No.
Did you notice it prior?
No.
Did you say you did review it?
Yes.
Did you review it thoroughly, or you just looked at it and said everything was okay?
I looked at it to refresh my memory. I mean, I remember it. This because I did screen captures myself, so I know it was from the video.
Okay. But so you say you just looked at it just to refresh your memory. You weren't looking at it to see whether or not the information contained in it was actually accurate?
I didn't pay attention to the time because the time was on the video.
Okay. But did you notice the time?
I did not. No.
Now, as far as the other slides, did you compare or pay attention to the other slides in this particular exhibit to see whether or not they're accurate?
They all have the time on.
I understand, but they also have a corresponding time in the right margin. Would you agree, correct?
Correct.
Did you do any type of verification of comparing the time that's depicted in the actual camera footage with whatever whatever time that's depicted in the right margin?
No.
Okay, so you can't say whether or not the times are actually accurate, correct?
For the video or for the notes?
You can't for the notes.
No.
But you can't tell us at least that this particular slide is not accurate, correct?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Reader. Any questions from the jury? Seeing none, sir, you can step down. It's 4:04. We'll pass time today. So tomorrow's Friday. This is probably good news for all of you, right? We're going to return tomorrow.